And welcome to the California, California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meetings, November 17, 2022. Let me start before turning a couple things over to our secretary. We are welcoming Britton Snipes, who has taken over as secretary for the board and for secretary for the Finance and Audit Committee. And so, Brittany, welcome aboard. Let's start this morning by calling the meeting to order, and if we can take the roll, please, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Director Schenk.
Here.
Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller. Vice Chair Miller.
She'll not be here today.
Okay. Assembly Member Ambarembolo. Director Pereira.
Here.
Director Gilmetti.
Here.
Director Escutia.
It's Escutia.
Escutia.
Thank you.
Escutia.
Here.
My apologies. Director Williams.
He'll not be here today.
Director Pena.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez.
Okay, I think that gives us a quorum. All right, well, with that, if I could ask Director Camacho to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to
to
the
the
flag
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 of the United
The United States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty and
justice for all.
justice for all.
Thank you, Ernie. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now go to public comments, and if our secretary would please advise those listening or watching how they can address the board this morning.
Thank you, Chair Richard. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. Today, we are hosting the meeting via Zoom. In a moment, we'll be taking public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of the public comments during this meeting. If you're logged onto the meeting via Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I can call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you in the queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands is raised. Once you're in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name. If applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allowed 2 minutes to provide their comment. I will interject at 1 minute 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our court reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay online and continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide public comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link of our live stream. Mr. Chair, it appears we have one public comment. Roland?
Good morning, Roland. Good morning, Roland.
Hello again, Chair Richards and Director. A quick comment on environmental clearance. If you use Google Maps, you will discover that the driving distance between San Francisco and Anaheim is 404 miles. So it's unclear why you are environmentally clearing 500 miles. So I'll just put that out to you. But what I'd like to do is to continue with the conversation about the status of contingency for the Central Valley CPs, especially the following sections of the TV report agendized as item number 4, the Finance and Audit Committee earlier this morning. Page 6 shows a drop in contingency of $1.4 billion across all CPs in a 12-month period, including a drop of $650 million for CP1, which will be down to $280 million on page 60, and a drop of $700 million for CP23, which will be down to 0 next month on page 25. In closing, I hope that we can have a frank and honest discussion about this situation later on in the agenda, including how draws on contingency could possibly have been allowed to balloon to 40% of the $10 billion expended on this project so far, instead of 20% as originally planned. And finally, I would like to remind members of the board that these Finance and Audit reports were put in place by former Director Michael Rossi 10 years ago, specifically to alert anyone who would read them of impending issues with the project.
15
Thank you.
seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Lebon.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, at this time, we do not have any other comments.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll close the public comment portion of our meeting this morning and move to our agenda. Item number 1 is the action on our October 20th board meeting and its minutes. Do we have a motion for approval?
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Yes,
correction.
yes, sure. Go ahead, Ernie.
Agenda item number 2 on the last board meeting, the third paragraph where it states, I think it was on our information, it's marked in yellow, where it talks about the chief executive officer will also report to the board on execution of additional contract management options under the contract before undertaking the work. If we look at page 28 of our transcript, line 17, it actually states the authority will ask for it to come back to the board before we implement any of those contracts, so we can discuss whether or not we should include them into the PDS.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. With that comment,
Wait, hold on, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Camacho, are you asking for the minutes to be amended?
Yes, I am.
right, I understand that.
Okay.
Okay, so let me make it clear then. With Ernie's amendment, do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Director Shank, a second, please.
A second.
Was that Director Gilmetti?
Margaret. That was Margaret.
Oh, Margaret, I'm sorry, Mark. Okay, Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Shank,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller, Assemblymember Arumbala, Director Pereira.
And that's Perea and okay, and
Yes.
Director Gilmetti,
Yes.
Director Escutia.
Yes.
Escutia.
No, Escutia.
Escutia.
Thank you for pronouncing it correctly. Yes.
Director Williams, Director Pena,
Yes.
Senator Gonzalez.
And I'll just say it. Britain, the ad hoc members don't vote. So that would be Assembly Member Arambula and Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. With that, then colleagues, we'll move on to item number 2, which is.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a point of clarification,
Sure.
if I may.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure in terms of, how this board, how we govern ourselves, and we do a good job at that. But in terms of these minutes and how they've been clarified, is it your intent that if there's any kind of question or lack of clarity, that we will always go back to the transcripts? Is that, in your opinion, the end all be all of all sources of because the minutes to me basically reflect a summary, and
Yeah.
many times it does not do, because obviously we cannot do word for word.
Yeah.
So is it your intent that if there's any uncertainty, that we
Yeah.
go back to the transcripts as our guidance?
Yes, absolutely.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you.
Thank you. Then on to item 2, colleagues, it's the construction update. This will be presented by our CEO as well as Garth Fernandez and Daniel Horgan. So Brian, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. You may recall that every May and November, I come before the board and do an update on our construction status in the Central Valley. So we've prepared that presentation for you today. I'll be joined during this PowerPoint presentation by our Regional Director, Garth Fernandez, as well as our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Daniel Horgan, as we go through this. And again, happy to answer questions along the way or at the end, whatever the board members prefer. Okay, let's move through the PowerPoint. First slide, please. Just by way of reminder, some things that we've progressed during 2022. One, the board well knows all of the environmental documents that we have brought to the board and been cleared. In the last 2.5 years, we've added about 330 miles of cleared environmental documents extending into the Bay Area and into Southern California. We expect in 2023, we'll be coming back to the board with the certification question for Palmdale to Burbank toward the end of 2023. That draft is now out for public comment. So as of today, we've cleared 422 of the 500 miles. Just note, I think the actual mile count between San Francisco and Anaheim based on our route is 494 miles, but we round to 500 for purposes of simplicity. We have 119 miles under construction in the Central Valley. Merced to Madera and Poplar Avenue to Bakersfield are now in advanced design. So we can advance the work to extend into downtown Merced and downtown Bakersfield, consistent with legislative direction in the Budget Act. Caltrans electrification construction is underway in the Bay Area. And by way of reminder, we are big time contributors to that project. That project has a cost estimate of about $2.3 billion. No, I take that back, $3.3 billion. And the High Speed Rail Authority is contributing about $733 million to that effort. That construction is underway. And of course, we have the funding committed for the LA Union Station improvements in Los Angeles to the tune of about $423 million. Next slide. Just talking about the Central Valley in general, this is where we're now working for the initial operating segment with the goal to achieve initial operations. By 2030, it's a 171-mile stretch. It is 100% environmentally cleared. Right now, 119 of those 171 are under construction. 52 miles are started the advanced design work, 34 miles roughly into downtown Merced, and about 18 miles south into downtown Bakersfield. We also have the design for the Central Valley stations underway right now. As the board members know, the track and systems procurement we paused on during 2022, and we'll look to come back for that procurement during 2023, along with perhaps the train procurement as early as the end of 2023. We'll obviously be coming back to the board about those. And in my CEO report, I'll talk a little bit more about upcoming procurements. Next slide.
Brian, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Brian,
Please go back. Yeah, go back to that slide. There you go.
Yeah, going back to the track and systems procurement in 2023.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around, if we spent 3 years on a process that fell apart in the last month or so, what makes us think that we're going to have a procurement in 2023?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it was very educational that procurement process. And I also think things like COVID, things like disruption in the markets tied to COVID, supply chain issues, and record inflation all led to difficult procurement strategies during 2022. I think the inflation number is starting to come down, and I think it'll come down further. I think the supply chain issues will abate as we get further into this. And I think we have to look at how we restructure that procurement. We did tracking systems along with the track, the systems, and the signaling all together. And we may want to consider, based on what we learned during that process, a restructuring of how we will move forward on that. And so we may regroup those issues differently as we go forward. For example, I believe we'll get more competition and more contractors interested in just the track work, and there will be fewer that are capable of doing the signaling and systems and perhaps the rolling stock. So we'll look at how we group those things separately to get the most competition out of the process. But I think once we move forward on our strategy, we'll come back to the board with how we would lay that out. And there'll be a discussion of when to go forward. I think we do need to go forward with it, though, before the new year gets out, so we can stay on track for a 2030 operating date.
So you expect us breaking it up into pieces and going out to bid again before the end of this year?
End of 23.
Going out to bid by the end of 23.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
So we won't be under that scenario. We'd be hopefully awarding contracts in 2024, 25.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on our timing, depending on what month we go out. But look, when we decided to stop the last procurement process based on a lot of input we got from industry and others, we are now entering a period where we're looking at the best strategy going forward. And I do think some of the global issues are abating a bit. I think the market will get better. And I think there'll be a reason to go back out with a restructured procurement. And so I still think it's the right thing to do. I think we should do it relatively soon. But I want to make sure the strategy is right. And again, that we'll all bring that to the board before we're out.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Brian, it's Lynn.
Yes. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. So the goal, initial operation by 2030,
Yes.
Just for clarification, which segment?
All of it, the 171 mile.
The 171 miles.
Yeah, Merced to Bakersfield. That remains our goal. I mean, if you think about it, as I said at the outset of this, all of this segment is currently environmentally cleared. We are now in design expansion for Merced and Bakersfield. It is an aggressive target, but I do think, for example, I believe we'll be at 30% design for both the Bakersfield extension and the Merced extension by the end of 23, which means we can start a full and active right-of-way procurement process, and we can move forward on this. So I think 7 years for something that's environmentally cleared now, we'll have design advanced by the end of the year is very doable.
All right. I like ambitious goals.
Okay. Next slide.
Brian, so
Yes.
we're going out, talking to industry about the tracking systems procurement, then find out which will yield us the most amount of competition.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot in this process, Ernie. And again, I think, look, between a global pandemic, 40-year inflation high, supply chain issues, the market was tough. And so we had requests to extend it even further. And, I made a decision to not. I think it was better to pause it right now. Let's let this market calm down. And we got really good feedback from industry during that process on how we might restructure this going forward. And I think there are ways to do that to maximize competition. And we want to explore that, put that strategy together and bring it to you guys for approval.
Well, I happen to agree with your earlier comment. By adding rolling stock will entice more competition. And by segregating perhaps the track and the systems and signaling with the rolling stock might be a good idea.
I appreciate that. We heard a lot in that vein over the last couple of months, I'd say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, one of the objectives that we've had is to achieve full construction management in 2022, and there are various elements of this. One is instituting complete project definition. This is a conversation that we've had with the board before. We've talked about it a little bit with F&A committee this morning. But, post-contract on all the construction packages, but particularly CP1, a little bit in 4, but also in 2-3. We saw scope changes to the structures that are to be built, mostly driven by third-party requests, cities, utilities, freight railroads. And so once those, and a lot of those scope changes were, agreed to in the years between 2015 and 2018, and we've been endeavoring to now define all of that scope, get it into the contracts and move the contracts forward, and then get into more traditional contract management. But you've got to get scope done before you can develop pure schedule and cost. And that's what we've been driving to do, and we're coming to the end of that. So I feel good about where we are on that. The other thing that was important for us to do is put out very realistic and achievable right-of-way acquisition numbers, because you can't predict when you're going to get work done if you don't have the right-of-way in hand. And so the first thing to do was to get very realistic and lay out a right-of-way schedule that was achievable. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how we're doing on that front. And then now we are focusing our efforts on finalizing third-party design issues. And what this means, so the members understand, is there are several places where we are relocating utilities. Maybe it's a electric line, or it's a telephonic or utility line, gas line. And so we have to move these things. Sometimes that involves other people's property. We have to buy that property, and we have to design what those locations, what those relocations look like. And so we now have a very focused process here on what we call the third party process. We identified 66 third party issues that we've had, and to date, 67 third party issues we've had, and to date, we have solved 58 of those. So we have 9 left, and we continue to work through those to get that stuff done so we can move very efficiently going forward. And then finally, working with our design build contractors to resequence the work and make sure that we're mitigating schedule impacts as best we can. And these are the 4 key things that we are working on as we go forward on this process. Next slide. Let's talk about right-of-way status. I always like to report to the board on where we are. I know longtime members like Tom and Lynn know this has been a tough slog for the authority, but we really are in much better shape today. We laid out a very realistic right-of-way schedule at the beginning of 2022. The downside of laying out the new schedule was it did set back our original estimates for construction completion, but those estimates, they needed a better right-of-way program in place, and now we have that, and this chart reflects where we are. We have about 2,301 parcels to get. We're 93% through that. We've delivered 2,141 of those parcels, and actually through October, we're up a little bit more. We're at about 93.6%. When I came here at the authority, in 2018, the estimate of parcels we needed was below 2,000, but that was because a lot of the scope was not in yet. Now that scope is all in. We added additional parcels. And so we stand where we stand today. We need roughly 2,301 to get all the 119 work done. We've delivered 2,141, and actually through October, we're up to 2,157. So we're about 93.5% done with the right of way. Next slide.
Well, wait, Brian, slow down a little bit. During the pre-meeting briefing with Brian Annis, I had asked about some of the challenges in the remaining parcels. Happy to hear the answer, but I think now that we're in public session, I'll ask it again. And that is, are there any parcels that you foresee having some challenges in the community, the schools, churches, community centers, anything that would impact the community in a negative way?
Yeah, I mean, most of those kind of fights are behind us. I'm not identifying a single one that I see as a big political fight or battle in front of us. What we have in front of us mostly are issues that we have to move to complete relocation of utilities and things like that. There are some landowners who want to take us all the way through the condemnation process, and so we're recognizing that. But things like, for example, the Fresno Rescue Mission, that was a big, tough thing that we had to work through. Yes, and I don't see things like that in front of us on this 119 months. Now, I will say, when we extend further, we get to Merced and Bakersfield and those extensions. we'll have right-of-way challenges that we'll have to confront and work through as we go. But on this 119 miles and getting this segment done, most of those big battles are behind us. We just don't have.
Well, we learned a lot of lessons and how to deal with these things in a more sensitive way. So I know going forward, we'll take those lessons with us. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Brian, I have one question around that too. Do you have, for the 119 miles, do you have the supporting or back data / information that would tell us specifically what the third party issues are, what the right of way issues are?
Yeah, I'm going to cover some of that a little bit in the remaining presentation here. But we do have, I can tell you CP by CP what the key third party issues are.
Well, maybe if you could just send us that documentation, probably be better. That way we don't miss anything.
Sure,
I'd like to know, for example, if we have a PG&E issue somewhere in Fresno or Madera, what is it?
Sure.
How long's it been out there? Where are we at right now? And when's it going to be resolved?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. This is just showing, since we adopted the updated right-of-way schedule in early 2022, and we refocused the management of the right-of-way real property division, we estimated that we had reached 90% of the right-of-way complete on July 31st of 2022. And you can see on this chart, we hit that mark in March of 22. Our further estimation is to be 95% complete by the end of this year, December 31st of 2022. And as of right now, we're at 93.6%. And we think we're on track to hit the 95% number by the end of 2022. So I'm pleased with the schedule we laid out in the beginning of 22. And we've gained a lot of credibility with the contractors by making sure that we're hitting the delivery dates on these parcels. And it's an important credibility thing for us going forward. And we're in a good process right now where it's pretty predictable. Next slide. This just shows our right-of-way production graph. The different colors are stages of the right-of-way process, but I think I would direct your attention to the middle of the circle where you see in September of 2022, we have 2301 total parcels to get, 2141 have been delivered. It's 160 remaining, and we delivered 16 in the month of September. I think I can tell the board, I don't want to get too far in front of next month's report, but it looks like we're going to deliver about 16 in October as well. And we're on track to meet the 95% by the end of 2022. Next slide. Design and construction update on the various CPs that we have underway in the Central Valley. Next slide. Again, just by way of quick reminder, construction package 1, 32 miles, northern part of Fresno County and southern part of Madera County, Avenue 19 in Madera to just south of American Avenue in Fresno County. 2-3 is the 65 miles in the middle, south of Fresno, just 1 mile north of the Tulare County line, Kern County line. And then construction package 4, 22 miles that goes Tulare, that should read to Kern County line to Poplar Avenue in Kern County, about 18 miles north of Bakersfield. Next slide. This is a slide you're familiar with. You've seen this before, but one of the things we had to get done, certainly since I got here in 2018, all the design packages ready, getting structures ready for construction, getting those designs completed. When I arrived here, we had about 50 of them done of the 163 we needed. And today, all 163 are complete. So these are design packages for the structures that we are building and the structures that are part of our process. We are still working through design issues on some of the utility relocations, but this is a chart that shows the completion of the design for the structures that we need as part of our system. And we've now completed that design work. Next slide. Utility relocation and design package approval. This is, again, we have roughly 1,860 utility relocation designs that are needed. As I'm talking to you now, we have about 1,493 of those complete, and we have a schedule to get it to about 98% of these complete by June of 2023. And that's important because once these design packages are clear, you work with the third parties, the utilities, the railroads, and others to execute crossing agreements and work plans and get everything else done so you can get to construction. So getting these design packages complete are important. And this is a key focus of what we're working on now. This is sort of the getting to the end of that pre-construction work so we can get into full construction in the valley. Next slide. I'm going to start with construction package 4, which is our southernmost construction package. We see a little bit of movement in the screen here. This is the Wasco Viaduct in the southern part of the CP4 package. Again, it's a 22-mile stretch bound by a point approximately 1 mile north of Tulare and Kern County line. The terminus is at Poplar Avenue to the south, about 18 miles north of downtown Bakersfield. Includes a lot of at-grade, retained fill, and aerial sections of the high-speed rail alignment. We expect substantial completion of this in spring of 2023. So CP4 is really coming to the end of the civil works, and this 22-mile stretch will be the first available stretch for doing the prep work and the things necessary for the track element of this. But this will be the first construction package that we get to significant completion, our substantial completion in spring of 23. Next slide. That's just a picture. We use this metric to show where we are on this. That SPI number, you want to see it 1, which means we'll be right on track, perfection on track to meet our estimated March 1st, 2023 date. We're slightly below that, but we're above the bottom line on this. And so we're tracking for a spring 2023 substantial completion date here. And we use this at the F&A committee to show where we are on this project in terms of delivery. Next slide. The scorecard we use to just show where we are in the various elements of pre-construction and construction work. All the design elements are completed for CP4. 90% of the right-of-way parcels have been delivered to the design builder. Utility relocations complete or in progress, 70%. Structures, not all of them are complete, which I'll show you in a minute, but they're all either complete or in progress here. And all the guideway is complete or in progress as well. Overall contract, we're through at about 86% through the current contract. Next slide. This is a picture of the structures on CP4 in terms of where we are. There are 11 key structures that we have to build. And by the end of 22, we're expecting that all the structures will be in the complete category. As of today, 8 are underway, 3 are totally complete. And again, we're expecting by the end of 22 that all of the structures for our system would be complete on CP4. Next slide. This is the guideway issues. Remember, guideway is the riding surface that will support and physically guide the high-speed train. There's 22 miles here on this segment. 13.6 are complete. 8.4 are underway and being complete as we finish structures and move forward. So again, this whole package will reach substantial completion in the early part of 23. Next slide. Primary risk areas on CP4, and this gets to a question that Director Perea asked just a few moments ago about where are the issues of risk. We have a very delicate, fragile, and important agreement with Semi-Tropic Utility District, Water District down there. Some of the, not the work that we so much need for our guideway, but we have utility relocation work down there. We have a coffer dam that we need to build and some other things on their property. And so we work very carefully with them. They approve designs, they approve work plans. They ultimately hand over the right-of-way once those things are approved. And so we go step by step on a process with them that was part of a larger mutual agreement that we executed with them some time ago. And so we are working through these issues with Semi-Tropic. And so one risk area is how quickly we work through those. Finalizing permits with the city of Wasco for some of the work that's going on in downtown Wasco. And then PG&E and BNSF processing for reviews and approvals for designs and maintenance agreements that are necessary to work in and around their equipment. So how do we mitigate these risks? That's the bottom part of this. We've assigned staff lead to work closely with Semi-Tropic on the design review approvals. And what we do is we do over-the-shoulder reviews now with the contractor on what the designs will look like for the utility relocations that are important to the semi-tropic folks, and we approve those internally first, then we submit them, get their comments, respond to those comments. And what was happening years ago is things were there was a lot of sort of do loop back and forth on comments. We're trying to now limit the number of go backs or talks in between on the comments. And so we do more over the shoulder review now. And we are having pretty good success. You see the status update for semi-tropic. We've 5 of the 8 utility designs have been approved for construction by semi-tropic. And we are just working through these one at a time as we go forward. And we're actually starting to begin work on their land. And so it's going pretty well, but it's delicate and careful. And we got a lot of staff attending to that working relationship. In the city of Wasco, we have a much improved partnership with the city, and we have to work through issues. We've just received a permit for work on Poso Avenue. Construction is underway and scheduled to be open by the end of the year. We'll be doing some work on North 6th Street in Wasco as well. And we've really worked closely with the city to gain those permits when we need them and continue that work. And again, on Poso, we have got the contractor working in a 24/7 period now to advance that work. And so again, things are going pretty well there. PG&E and BNSF, we've established that third-party task force that I mentioned earlier to focus on expediting design approvals. We're down to the last 2 issues in terms of the relationship between these two. There will be some PG&E and utility relocation stuff limited to PG&E on 4 that we are examining whether to de-scope and do those later because they won't affect the guideway or the structures we are building. And so we might be able to do some of those later through a contract directly with the PG&E contractor. And so we're going to look at that. But we are again working towards reaching substantial completion of CP4 in the spring of 23. Next slide. Construction package 1. This is the 32 miles that goes right through downtown Fresno. Next slide. That, of course, is a familiar site for folks who live in Fresno. That's the Cedar Viaduct, which goes over the Highway 99. You can see it's advanced quite a way. A lot of the scaffolding and other things are down now. That structure will be brought to you by McDonald's, and so we'll paint it red and yellow. No, just kidding. We will put a sign up that say 43 billion served. No, just kidding. But anyway, we've had good progress on this structure. And again, the 32 miles between Avenue 19 in Madera County and East Avenue in Fresno, or East American Avenue in Fresno, is this stretch. 19 grade separations in this area, 3 viaducts, a major river crossing, and 2 trenches are part of this system. The contract has submitted a substantial completion date by the 4th quarter of 2025, which we indicated in our funding plan for the $4.2 billion sub-D plan we owe the legislature. We've conditionally accepted that schedule, and we start to negotiate with the contractor on risk and mitigation tied to that schedule to see where it finally lands. But we're going to be right around that date, and we'll work with them on that as we go forward on a time impact analysis and things like that. I'm going to walk through each of the elements of CP1 now. So next slide. Again, the scorecard design is 100% complete. Right-of-way parcels here, we're up to 94%. We're almost done. Of 1,088 parcels needed for this, we've handed the design build entity about 1,013. So we're really getting to the end of that. Utility relocations in progress, 73%. Structures in progress or complete, 79%. Miles of guideway, about half are available now, and more coming as we move these relocations, utility relocations. Contractors work through at about 64% today. Next slide.
Brian, if I could ask you on going back to that slide, on the utility relocations, if you were to separate those 2 out, complete versus in progress, what would those percentages be?
I'm going to go off the top of my head here, and I can get you formal numbers, but I think the ballpark figure in Fresno that we need is on the order of 900 utility relocations. I know that 350 on the order are complete, 350 are underway, and the remainder yet to be started.
Okay, now, and I know you're soon going to be delivering a construction schedule that this board can rely on, but how is that meshing with that Q4 2025 substantial completion?
All of the needs for the utility relocations are incorporated in that Q4 25 schedule.
Right. So are we going to see, for example, on utility relocation, a column saying how many are complete, how many are in progress, and how many have yet to be
Yes,
started?
when we
let me finish.
report,
Let me finish, and then also show them what the plan is to achieve each one.
yes. So we report to the Finance and Audit Committee each month the status of the utility relocations by CP. So we report now. The FNA committee work that we put forward breaks it out that way. It breaks out how many are complete, how many are in progress, how many are yet to be started. And so we that is in the FNA committee information that we provide each month to the FNA committee. I'm happy to send it to you directly to Henry. And so we do that, and that is incorporated in the Q4 25 schedule for CP1 right now.
All right, thank you.
Brian,
Yes.
on that same issue, the 53% of miles of guideway.
Yeah.
So we're only talking about guideway for CP1.
Yes.
That represents 53%. And then the overall contract, is that overall contract for the entire, I mean, it seems like you're mixing the guideway with the overall contract value.
Well, I'm not trying to mix it. I think I'm doing an estimate. The 53%.
I don't mean you're mixing it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand. So have we expended 64% of the contract value?
Yeah, as that value is expressed today, that's correct.
Okay.
And so yeah.
Thank
and the
you.
53% is just a percentage of the total guideway for this section and what's open, what's ready to go.
Okay. The ray I was reading was 53% of the guideway being completed, with 64% of the guide, just the budget for the guideway. But that's the 64%.
That's the overall contract.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'm going to clarify in just a second here the status of the guideway as well.
Sorry.
That's all right. Next slide. So this is the structures in progress. There are 33 structures that we are constructing on CP1. 16 of those are now complete. 10 of those are underway or in progress right now. We have 7 remaining to get started on. And so of the 33, that's where we stand on the structures for these. And just a comment up there that 2 additional structures have commenced construction and 3 additional will be completed soon, for a total of 16 complete by the end of this year. Next slide. On the guideway, I think getting to your question, Ernie, on the guideway issue, again, we have 32 miles of guideway on this section. 2 is fully complete. 15 is underway or in progress. We have 15 miles remaining. And again, the biggest impediment to the guideway opening up here is the work we're doing to methodically move these utility relocations. And again, we're working through those as fast as we can. Next slide. Finalizing scope. There are significant change orders. The board may recall I updated the board. I think when we met in Fresno last, I identified 12 different change orders that are part of CP1 that we are executing so we can advance work and get the scope defined and finalized as part of this project. The 2 that are referenced here are Caltrans State Route 99, 2.5 miles of at-grade guideway that, you know, when the authority relocated Highway 99, originally this rail element was going to be a part of that contract. It was not, but that work still had to be done. So this was for some time known as the missing 2.5 miles. But we have now executed that contract. That scope is finalized, and that work will commence soon. The second part is what we call the sweeper package, which is something I talked to the board about before, but these are adding stairs and maintenance access points and escape points and things like that to the structures that were again initially not in the design build contract, but because they're mobilized on the site, they have built the other structures. We incorporated this work into the current contract, and that was executed. That scope was finalized as well. So these are completed and now moving forward. Of the 12 scope issues that we identified, to get the scope finalized. On CP1, we have completed 10 of those. There are 2 remaining. Next slide. Other big ones that are pending, Church Avenue. This is the part, I know that Tom and Henry will be most familiar with this, but the section of town between downtown and where the Cedar Viaduct crosses the Highway 99 is the Church Avenue grade separation there. City of Fresno changed the configuration of that grade separation where they moved from 1 to 2 and added some additional requirements. So we are now negotiating a change order to complete that scope work, and then that's got to go through the authority governance for approval. But that's work that's underway right now. And then in the downtown area, Tulare, Ventura, Fresno streets, the freight railroads asked for wider bridges. That was agreed to some time ago. Again, we've now worked through getting that design complete. And now we're working through, again, getting this change order negotiated and finalized and put through our authority governance process so we can get this locked in, scope in the schedule and move forward. And so these are some of the final remaining parts of the scope for CP1. Next slide. Primary risk areas here. I don't think many of these will be surprising to you. One is there are requirements for road closures in the city of Fresno for some of the big work we have in front of us at Herndon and Shaw and Church. And so Garth Fernandez will lead our effort working with the city on how we'll do the traffic management plans and how and when road closures will come into place to make sure we're working through these issues. Garth, I don't know if you want to comment on that work at all, but that's an important part of what we have to do for some of these big construction parts that are left.
Sure. So we are continuing to work with the city of Fresno. They have been an excellent partner with us. I have executive meetings with the city to ensure we can accomplish the schedule. You know, these 4 locations, Herndon, Shaw, Church, and then we also have Olive and McKinley, are all major closures for the city of Fresno, and they have expressed concern. So we're going to be setting up a workshop with the city to walk through our schedule and all of the detours that we'll have in place to accomplish the scope of work. They've also begun to work with us on traffic control plan approvals that we need for all the utilities that are going in at the same time. So they have been an excellent partner, and we continue to work with them.
The second risk area here is the enforcement of environmental specifications. And all that means really is there are times during the construction process where a CDFW has some permitting requirements that we need to make sure that the contractors are sticking to, and that we work closely with CDFW on how those are applied to this contract. And so, again, it's a sort of a partnership we have with them, but we are executing that pretty well. And we'll continue to do that to try to minimize needs for any amendments or new requirements and make sure we're following through on all the things that we need to do to move the construction forward. So that's really a key partnership with us and the CDFW on permitting permits and making sure construction sticks with the permit requirements. The third one is railroad approvals. A lot of the CP1 stuff is dealing with UP's right of way and UP's equipment. We have put together a task force, including our railroad lead, who's James Lebanowski, working with Dennis Kim, Garth, Daniel Horgan, and others to really make sure that we're coordinating well with UP on the things that are in front of us, all the work that's left in front of us. Just to give you a sense of the scope of the work we have with UP, over the course of this project, we have something like 1,300 agreements that we need UP to approve for us. And to date, we've sought and received approval for about 900 of those, about 800 of those, 881, I think is the number. So we have 473 agreements that we still have to get approved through them. And these are just different small parts of the work that we have to do that affects their right of way or their process. And so we now have a team focused working directly with UP on these issues and making sure we can get through these approvals as quickly as possible. But again, 900 down, about 470 or so left to go. And then the last big risk issue is the density of the utility conflicts in the city of Fresno. As you see there are 6 times more utility conflicts on average in downtown Fresno than other parts of our right of way here. So there's a lot to do. Dennis Kim, as I mentioned earlier, I gave him delegated authority, not just to be the director of real property, but to take on an executive in charge role of third-party relationships. And we're working well with these third parties now on moving these, getting agreements in place to move the utilities, get designs done, and move forward. As I said earlier, of 67 different issues that we have to hit up with the third parties to move the program forward. We've completed 58 agreements. We have 9 left to go, and so that's where we are on that issue. Next slide. CP23. This is the longest construction segment in the southern part of the middle part of the 119-mile segment. What you're looking at there is the Hanford Viaduct superstructure that's in Hanford. It's the second. This is the second significant construction contract that was executed, part of the initial operating segment. Again, 65 miles between Fresno and just 1 mile north of the Tulare-Kern County line. 26 different grade separations in the counties of Fresno, Tulare, and Kings, including viaducts, underpasses, and overpasses. Contractor submitted an estimated substantial completion of the first quarter of 2026, which we have conditionally accepted. And again, we get into negotiations now with the contractor on additional risks and mitigations on this. I expect this might pull forward a little bit more on this one. So we'll have to see how that goes, but that's roughly where this one stands on schedule right now. And again, we'll work through the negotiation process with the contractor. And again, I think this one has a good chance of pulling forward, but that's where we are putting it right now. Next slide. Again, the scorecard, which is similar for the other, all design complete, right-of-way parcels over 93%. Here on this part, utility relocations complete and in progress, 64%. Structures complete or in progress, 63%. Miles of guideway in progress or complete, 74%. And again, that overall contract value has been about 70% of the current contract value. Next slide. There's a lot of structures here, a total of 49 different structures on CP23. 14 of those are complete, 17 are underway or in progress, and 18 are left to commence on this segment. Next slide. In terms of guideway, 65 miles of guideway, 33 of miles of that are complete, 15 are underway, and 17 are yet to go. They yet to begin in terms of the clearing of that guideway. But again, you see that about 74% of the guideway is either complete or underway here. Next slide. Again, this, as the board well knows, we had 4 big commercial issues on CP23 that we negotiated and worked through, executed important change orders to get the scope finalized and get the work going. The BNSF intrusion protection barrier, 15 miles of that barrier, that's been executed. That scope is finalized. Construction is underway. Hanford Viaduct, again, a change in the overall length and length of the viaduct, and we've finished the negotiation with that. That change order is also executed. That construction is also underway. Deer Creek Viaduct is the last one that we most recently negotiated. That change order is negotiated, going through our governance process, and the contractor has mobilized to start work on the Deer Creek one. The last one, which the board will be familiar with, is the Cross Creek Viaduct, which was a alternative technical concept that came to us, and we don't think we have any real liability for the cost issues tied to a failed ATC. So this one is in arbitration right now. Next slide. Primary risk areas here are tied to right-of-way acquisition for some very critical utility relocations, both electric transmission line and some irrigation lines that have to be moved. Third-party coordination for design review, approval, negotiation on work windows with the irrigation seasons, the railroad moratoriums, and negotiation on maintenance agreements, as well as some commercial settlements of key disputes, which those 4 are the primary ones that we've settled. I'll just say this about each of these issues in terms of mitigations. We're working to finalize the right-of-way for the utility relocations. There were 4 key parcels that we needed to move a major electric transmission line and an irrigation line. Of those 4 parcels, 3 are now in hand, completed, and the last one will be done by December 6th of 2022. So those parcels will be completed. In terms of the third-party task force issues, 71% of the issues on the third-party structure down here in 2-3 have been resolved. We continue to work on the remaining ones. We're actively negotiating those commercial disputes that I just spoke about. Next slide. Program risks and opportunities. Next slide. I think the biggest risk that we've talked about before, and just that we've seen in terms of where we are on some of the change orders and the things that we have to resolve going forward, is in part it's the impact of inflation on some of what we're doing. Since the beginning of this year, we saw, or actually starting in 2020, we saw inflation climb. It reached a 40-year high in the middle of 2022, peaked out at about 9% in June of 2022. Obviously, the contractors included some of those escalation points and some of the change orders that we've executed, and they are claiming additional escalation costs. We are working through a strategy to deal with those and determine which ones are reasonable, what's the right benchmark, and how do we true up, claims versus real costs. And so those are things we're working through to manage this issue. And we're developing that strategy and addressing those concerns with the contractors. Again, contract CP4 is coming to the end of its work here, and so maybe less of an ongoing issue there than you'd find on 1 or 2, 3. But again, we'll have to see what happens with inflation. Signs to me show that inflation in 2023 should start to dip down, and we should be less impacted by this going forward. Next slide. Really good program opportunities for us as we go forward. Again, we've talked to the board before about our strategy for federal grants. This is a chart that you've all seen before, but these are grants that we have now pending with the federal government. Under the Biden administration, we were awarded 2 grants over the course of the last 12 months, totaling about $49 million. There's a mega program grant that is pending now that we have about just under $1.3 billion that we are waiting for a word on. We expect that those grants will be awarded by the end of the year. And again, our number is $1.268 billion on that grant. We have a railroad crossing elimination program grant that's waiting as well, pending for $67 million. That would allow us to advance some grade separations in Shafter. And then there are a couple more applications coming up. One is what's called the CRISI grant, or the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement Grant. And again, we're looking at completing all grade separations through Shafter with that grant request, and that's coming up next for us in October, by the end of November here. And then the big one later next year in 2023 is what's called the Federal State Partnership for Intercity Rail. This is roughly a $12 to $15 billion program that is really dedicated strictly to intercity rail, and for the components like cleaner, faster, in disadvantaged communities. Those are some of the things that the USDOT will be looking at to award that grant. We will be going in with a rather large grant request for that later in 2023. And so that's where we are. We've identified over the course of the infrastructure bill that passed over the next 5 years, if Congress and everybody holds to the numbers that were part of that original act, we'd like to see about $8 billion come to this program out of that federal funding. And that's where that's been our goal since the program started, and we remain active and aggressive in pursuing federal grants. So that's where we are in this. Next slide. That's about all I got. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the members.
Thank you, Brian. Excuse me, colleagues. I think you've done a great job on this presentation, and we appreciate it. If there are no further questions or comments on this, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the CEO.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just do have one question for you. The schedule that staff has been working on, when can we expect that presented to the board?
The new construction and completion schedule?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all of this will be, will be part of the project update report that we submit to the legislature in March. But let me say that what I just gave you and the construction dates that we just put in are those reflect the construction schedules as we see them right now. So 2023 in spring for CP4, and the 25 for 1, first quarter 26 for 2-3. Now there will be on 2, 3, and 1, there will be some movement, but this is minor. But movement as we negotiate time impact analysis and we work through the schedules that they've submitted to us, we've conditionally approved. But as we go through those and lock them down further, there'll be, I think 2, 3 might come forward. I think 1 might slip a little bit, but it's going to be in the matter of months or weeks and not years. And so I think I think what I've laid out here is exactly where we stand right now on schedules.
Brian, I think that what we're concerned about also would be interested in seeing is a more detailed schedule for beyond the 119 miles, but to the 2030 date, keeping in mind Lynn's comment and Henry's also, but that's what will be very important for us to see. Is that going to be addressed in the PUR also?
Yes, it will.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
We're required by statute to.
Right. Mr. Chairman,
yes, Henry.
let me ask my question a different way. And first, let me say, I think since Brian's been here, there's been a tremendous amount of progress made throughout the system with all the environmental clearances, et cetera. But the nagging problem that we've had is CP1 and elements of 2. And the end of last year, we were committed a schedule that we could hold ourselves accountable to. That slipped to the first quarter of this year, to the second, to the third. And I thought that was coming soon, but now what I'm hearing is, well, what we just told you today is pretty much what it is, which really doesn't have a lot of detail behind it. So if I'm understanding correctly, that we're going to be substantially completed by Q4 in 2023, I want to see the data that supports that.
Sure.
I mean, how can this board hold itself accountable to getting this thing done if historically we keep giving deadlines we can't meet?
Yeah, so I'm happy you asked the question because that's exactly the task that we've undertaken. Prior work done did not include full scope of this program. What we've been doing since I've been here is getting all of the scope into the program. I can't give you a schedule or budget without the scope complete. So we are now working to get this scope done. The schedules that I laid out to you, what I have directed the team to do, since the scope is now getting finalized, is to work with the contractors on what the achievable schedules look like. That's what we have received and conditionally approved, and that's what I've reported to you here. I will say this too. The project update report that we submit to the legislature in March and that this board will get a look at before it is submitted to the legislature in March will have as detailed an expression of schedule for both the 119 miles and an estimate of schedule for the Bakersfield to Merced stretch, or how we're proposing to achieve the 2030 date in it. But in terms of your question on the 119, I think what you're seeing here on what I've just given you is the result of months and months of work with the contractor to identify when we think we can get these things done. And now that we have the scope mostly in on these, I think these schedules become much more credible and much more achievable. And I've directed the team to not give me optimistic schedules, give me schedules we think we can achieve. And so the end of 25 on 1 right now, the first Q of 26 on 2-3 is where it stands as a conditional approval by us. We have to negotiate some risk and mitigation issues with the contractor on those. Those will settle, but they will all be done certainly in time for the project update report. And I'll provide all the data that you may want on what that schedule looks like. But these are the schedules roughly that they're going to be in the project update report. And again, they will move a little after negotiation, but all of that will be laid out in the project update report and to this board before that report is final.
And that's going to be now first quarter of next year?
The project update report and the statute is due on March 1st. The schedules I'm providing you now are the construction schedules as we see them. They, again, 1 and 2, 3 will move slightly through negotiations, but roughly what you're seeing is where we think it's going to end. We think those are achievable dates, and we will finalize those as best we can for the project update report that will be, either by the end of this year or in January. Because again, this board's going to see it before it's submitted to the legislature.
Okay, but when we say, Brian, that, here's the report or where we think that we're going to achieve it, I mean, that's great. But like Lynn was saying earlier, I mean, it's great to be optimistic, but we have to have detail behind it, and we all want to achieve the same goal. Obviously, we want to get this thing done. So if I'm being told a Q23 now is going to be substantial completion for CP1, I mean, I'm not going to spend the time on this board meeting to go into that kind of detail. That's not. I mean, I want to work with your staff, and I actually, as you were speaking, I sent Brian Annis and Garth an email. I mean, I'd like to sit down with them and maybe go back to the Finance and Audit Committee report and just taking that one bullet out, just utility relocation. Like I asked you, tell me how many there are. How many are actually done? How many are in progress? How many have yet to be started? And what's the plan to get them done, and where they're going to get done? I mean, I think those are legitimate questions. I don't want to take the time of this board to ask each one of those now, but I mean, I do want to sit down with staff, because if we are going to make Q4 2023, then there has to be substantial movement on utility relocation. I mean, it's pretty simple.
There's no question about it. But again,
so I want to see your plan. I just want to see the plan.
I will put it together and give it to you. And again, I commend you to look at the F&A committee materials, because CP1 is very clear. 384 have been relocated, 343 are underway and approved, 265 are remaining to start. Yeah. That's CP1. And we have it in there for each of these. And again, I'm happy to give you guys whatever you need. What I'm reporting to you today is the result of months and months of work to get the scope finalized so we can get schedules that make sense and are achievable. And that's what I'm reporting to you today. And I will provide all the detail that you want, but I also commend you to take a look at what is at the F&A committee reports, because they do line by line, CP by CP, go through the utility relocation numbers.
Understood.
Henry, one of the things that Jim Gilmetti and I have been saying over and over again, it's a result of, some of this is a result of our design build contract, where without the final design, we can't put together a real schedule, because it has not been designed. So we have a cost issue as well as a time frame issue. And Jim has been on top of that as well, asking for, when we go forward, to look at a different delivery method other than design build. You might want to comment on that, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Ernie. Henry, I appreciate what you're saying, but Ernie's right on. We don't have all the final plans completed yet. And I'm concerned about schedule as you are, but I'm more concerned about a final cost estimate, because we've thrown numbers around the state till the cows come home, and we're not close to presenting to the public what we think the real final numbers are to complete this project. And I know Brian's staff has been working hard to get there, but first we've got to finish the design. The design's almost finished. It's not finished on 4. It's about to be finished on 1 and 2, 3. So as soon as we have that completed, we can bear down on the cost and bear down on the complete schedule, as Brian indicated.
And let me just say that,
and maybe Mr. Gomez, if I could just ask you one question, and obviously you have the expertise in construction, much more so than most of us. Just taking, for example, utility relocation, and maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse, is what you're talking about, does that have to be resolved before these known utility relocations can be settled?
Well, we need to know what they are so that we can put a cost behind it.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
So they're working. There's a lot of loose ends that are coming to the end of the trail, but we're not quite to the end of the trail yet, so that we can say with a great degree of certainty that here are the final number estimate to finish the project, and here's the precise schedule. As Ernie said, these designs have to be finished, not just the construction designs, but utility relocations. As far as right-of-way goes, we've added some parcels, we've taken some parcels away, and that's all a result of finalizing the design. So this thing, as you know, is a complete mess before, and we're just trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Understood.
And get to the bottom of schedule and costs.
But
Yeah, let me ask you this. Let me ask you and Ernie this. I mean, again, going back to this report, where now with the expertise and the deep dive you both have been doing, is Q4 2023 a realistic date for substantial completion for CP1? If it is, then I'll rely. If you say yes, then okay, then it's yes. If you say no, then I don't want to tell the public things anymore that are not true. There's been too much of that. And if that's not a realistic date based on what you know, what you're seeing, and what you know needs to be done, why are we saying that?
Before you answer that, I want to just be clear. The CP1 date is Q4 of 2025, not 23. CP4 is Q1 of 2023.
Okay.
So I just want to be really clear on that. And again, the schedule comes out of when we think we'll complete these utility relocations. Jim Gilmetti is absolutely right. Design is the precursor to all of this. You have to get the designs done so you can move the utility relocations. One of the earlier slides, if you look at slide 11, Henry, in 2018, we had 52 of the structured design elements complete here. We needed 163. So as of today, 163 are done. And that's just for the structures we're building. So now we know what those are. We know what that scope is. That's advancing. What's left in the other slide is the slide on the design, which is the next slide, slide 12. We have to finish designs for the utility relocations. There's 1,860 utility relocations. The designs done as of today are 1,423.
Yeah.
And we are working to complete all the rest of them. We think we'll be at 98% done by June of 23. And then it's about finalizing the agreements to move the relocations and get them done. And so these are the things that were untied before that are now being tied up so we can do the construction work. But the estimate of schedule all work off of right-of-way and relocation dates. That's what we've
Henry,
tried to put
one of
together.
the things
Jim, Ernie, could you answer my question though? And it's correct, it's 2025.
yeah. One of the things that we have to appreciate in your case is that this is your backyard and you have to answer questions to your constituency out there on a daily basis. And I can sense the frustration. And I agree with you, and I'd be more than happy to join you if in fact you would like to get a deeper dive into that again for a validation. So, I can sense that frustration. I get asked questions as well, but you live there. So, you get it every day firsthand. So I'd be more than happy to help you and join with you if in fact you want to take a deeper dive.
All right, thanks, Ernie.
All right, everybody. What we're really looking at, I again apologize for my voice. What certainly those of us who are in the construction business realize, usually the first thing you would have been doing was utility relocations before you even started construction. So what we're doing is we're trying to write the process that wasn't able to be done that way at the outset because of commitments that were made to the federal government in terms of how soon the money had to be spent. If it was done the way that we do in our businesses, and there's 3 of us on this board that do this, the process would have been very, very different. So I think that what we've done over the last 4 years, since Brian has taken over, is to try to get us back into a focus of what should have been done first by trying to get them done after the fact, which has made it even more difficult. But I think that in terms of what the members of this board should feel some confidence in, is that I cannot imagine any one of 9 votes would ever be cast by this board or probably succeeding boards to continue doing what we ended up doing back in 2013 and 15. So that's the change. It wasn't that people didn't understand it. It was a commitment for the funding in order to move this project forward. As frustrating as that may be, but that's where we were. And so you all have made a number of very pertinent comments, all leading in the same direction. But the fact of the matter is, I cannot imagine that this board would support, nor do I believe management would bring an alternative which would include design build again. Anyway, thank you all very much. And Henry, thank you very much for bringing it to focus. Brian, where do you want to go next? We're done on this.
Unless there's more questions, Mr. Chairman, on that presentation,
yeah, let's just go.
I'm happy to move to the next slide.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Chairman, you want to move to the next agenda?
Yes, that's where we are.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to the next, yes, I'm almost kind of like afraid of asking this question because I don't, you know, but I remember last time, you know, and by the way, all this stuff for me as one of the new members really helps me, you know, understand the constraints that you have been put under as a result of whatever happened in the past. And obviously we just have to now muddle our way forward as efficiently as possible. But in terms of efficiency and also in terms of transparency, I believe that Mr. Camacho last meeting had asked for a schedule, a written schedule of procurement opportunities. And for me, that's really interesting because obviously we all believe in a competitive environment. And at the same time, we need to figure out that our conflict of interest rules are really buttoned up. Yep. Are we as the board going to get, I mean, I know that Henry asked for a schedule, so his schedule for his issues, I'm going to ask for this schedule, and maybe Mr. Camacho might decide to help me out here, but are we going to get a copy of that schedule pursuant to Mr. Camacho's request as to what are the
excuse me a second. What's happening next? I'm sorry, Martha, but what's happening next on the CEO report is Brian is going to make a presentation with regards to upcoming procurements.
Okay.
That's coming next and meeting next in a moment. I believe so. That'll be a verbal presentation. I'm sure that Brian will forward. I'm going to ask him to forward those procurements that are provided for, not the procurements, but that list of what we should expect. I think the question that Ernie had asked was, what have we got coming forward in the next 6 months? So
okay, all right. I'm sorry for having
not at all. No, not at all. Don't be sorry about anything. All right, Brian, on your CEO report, we'll go ahead and move to that now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You pull up the PowerPoint. Next slide. Members, Director Camacho did ask what the future procurements that we're coming before this board over the course of the next 6 months to year are, and this is a brief list of what those will be. The first is the Rail Systems Engineering Services contract. And I'm going to jump from this to the bottom bullet point, the construction management services for rail design, build, maintain contracts as well. To just talk about these two first. You may recall when we did what's called the PDS contract, the AECOM Fluor contract. That contract did not include some elements that we have here at the authority by contract with WSP, and that includes the Rail Systems Engineering Services, as well as potential construction management services for rail contracts. When we say rail contracts, these are contracts like track, systems, signaling, rolling stock. And so there's a construction management contract that will come forward for that. And the Rail Systems Engineering Services contract is expertise that we will go out for to help us make sure that we are meeting all testing and commissioning requirements for high-speed rail services. that we are integrating the contracts well from a management perspective between systems, signaling, rolling stock, and track. And so the rail systems engineering services contract is the first one. That'll be an RFQ. We want to bring that one to the board relatively soon, whenever the board is ready for us to bring that. I know there's work we're doing on the conflict of interest policy, but that's the first one that would come out. Likely the second one would be the construction management services one that would be in place to help us get ready for track and systems and rolling stock. Track and systems restructured contracts, and this is we may not go out with the same structure that we did with the last one, but restructure it a bit to make sure we're maximizing competition going forward. We're looking at seeing this later in 2023, and rolling stock will likely be at the very end of 2023. And then how we pair and match which parts will be track, which will be system signaling, and how and whether it relates to rolling stock, that's a strategic decision that we still have to work through and make. But these are the four upcoming procurements that will come before the board during 2023. Again, rail systems engineering services, track and systems restructured contracts, rolling stock, and the construction management services. Just a note on the differences: the rail systems engineering services and the construction management are straight, what we call A&E contracts for services. And so those will be done through an RFQ process. The other two, which involve
Brian, what's A&E?
Architectural engineering services,
Right.
A&E. We use an RFQ process for those. The track and systems in the rolling stock, which involve the manufacturing of a train against a schedule or the completion of construction work against a schedule. Those will involve both an RFQ to qualify firms, but then an RFP process as well. So those will be a two-step in those. And again, these will come out over the course of the next 12 months. We have not laid out the specific schedule on these procurements yet because we're working through the strategy on the track and systems now, which we just concluded the last one. And so these are the four issues that will come before the board over the course of the next year in terms of
All right.
RFQs.
I have a question on construction management services, if I may.
Yep.
I just wanted to again clarify, Brian, that when we discuss construction management services as part of the overall contract that was granted last board meeting to AECOM, I think if I remember correctly, I think you stated that the construction management services could go to AECOM as part of your effort to perhaps do almost like a one-stop, I know you did not use those words, a one-stop, but you seem to want to put everything together with AECOM. But however, if I remember correctly, you said there's also an option to contract out that construction management services aspect of it to the broader world. So in order to increase competition, what I said, is that accurate?
Well, let me clarify just one point. The construction management that we're looking at, whether AECOM can provide, is what's now been the construction management over the 119 miles in construction in the valley. This construction management that's listed here is construction management over the next rail issues, track and systems, signaling, those things. Those will not be done through AECOM and Fluor. These will be done through a separate contract. The CM for the rail related stuff. The issue about whether we would use AECOM Fluor for current construction management issues, that's an evaluation that we want to conduct to make sure before we just keep extending the current contract managers, should we use AECOM to do it as a more consolidated and streamlined way of advancing that. And that's a decision that we're looking at and making. We'll talk to the board about, but that is outside of the CM services for the rail services.
All right, thank you for the clarification. And I'll just stop right there because I don't want to, get in too deep into this on stuff that I don't know. But thank you for the clarification.
Well, Martha, the CM that you're referring to, or that Brian just referred to, is the CM for CP 1, 2, 3, and 4. That was what he was talking about incorporating into the PDS contract. These are independent from that.
Okay,
Right.
got it. But however, yes, it could be incorporated into the AECOM PDS contract, but if this board decided to perhaps, contract it out to the outside world, that can be done too, correct?
Yeah, it can be, but I want to be, we can talk about this 1,000 different ways, but I would just say that, remember that, like, for example, CP4 is going to come to conclusion in the very beginning of 2023. So we're not going to contract out that work, right? That's coming to an end. In terms of 1 and 2, 3, that will have a little bit more time left. I think the issue is whether or not we want to streamline the number of different contractors we have to manage existing work. And that's an option that we have. I'm happy to talk to the board about it before any final decision is made. And I think I've committed to do that. But that is just on the 2, 3, and 4 work 1 and 2, 3 work that is left. But even on those, I would probably not recommend that you do a new procurement on that in the middle of that work coming to the end. In other words, I would either keep the PCMs we have in place now on that work, or I would consider asking the PDS to take that work over, but not start a whole new procurement process that might take 6 or 8 months when the work is going to conclude shortly thereafter. So that's why there's a separation of looking at it there, but on this CM work for the rail stuff, that's a different, that's not going to involve AECOM floor.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Brian, one question. When does the CPM or the CM contracts expire under CP 1 and 2, 3? In terms of funding.
4 will extend into the conclusion of that work because 4 is going to conclude in the first quarter of 23. The other ones have a interim date of concluding by December of this year, but remember they've been extending about a year at a time right now. Okay. And so I will likely extend them a little further as we evaluate the ability of others to do it. And so that's where those stand right now. So
we aren't without CM services.
We will not be without CM services.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
And then management will be back before the board with its recommendation on how we move forward later.
Yeah. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian, if you've got anything else.
No, nothing more on this. Just the last slide I have is a quick program update, and then I'm done.
Okay.
The program update here is just last night in Los Angeles, the authority received another award from the Women in Transportation Seminar, this time the Los Angeles chapter, for recognizing our work as Employer of the Year, mostly because of the diversity in our workforce, particularly with women executives who are helping us advance this program. When you look at our executive team, we've got great professionals on this. And look, when I came into transportation 28 years ago, it was a male-dominated field. That's no longer the case here. It's certainly not the case at the authority. And it's just nice to receive the recognition for the diversity that we bring to the table here. And so I'm appreciative of the recognition from the Los Angeles Women in Transportation Seminar. That picture is of our regional director, LaDonna DiCamillo, receiving that award. And that's the second chapter award we received this year on this. So again, just wanted to tout the executive team on this stuff. And again, appreciative of that recognition from the women.
Well, congratulations, Brian, and congratulations to staff. Next time, for future reference, if there's such an opportunity, if you can let some of us know who live in Los Angeles, I would have loved to have attended that award ceremony and give support to our staff.
Happy to do that
as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Thank you, Brian. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. The final item, colleagues, is finance and audit, and I'll make this really short so you're not having to bear with my scratchy voice here. I'll not talk at all about the Central Valley update. You've heard of that already in the earlier presentation, and it's certainly more detailed than we got in finance and audit today. Just a couple quick things with regards to where we are in other areas on cash management. For instance, we've got this is at the end of September. We had $1.9 billion, which in the bank, 100 or 1.8 of that is from cap and trade. Expenditures in that month were 117 million. the admin budget, which has got a limitation on how much we can spend on admin, which is 2%. We'd spent 15 million through the first 3 months of this current fiscal year. That happens to be about 16% of what's budgeted in this fiscal year for admin. Our capital outlay budget this year, as mentioned last month, is 2.3 billion. We spent in the month of September 211 million, or about 9% of that budgeted amount for the fiscal year. Monthly expenditures were at 74 million in the month of September. Looking ahead to October, which is just a look ahead, there's a substantial increase going into October, where the estimate is that it will be about 123 million, or about 65% greater than it was in September. 30 million of that is invoicing for the Hanford Viaduct project, which is under construction, as you know. Construction contingency stood at 977 million. In looking ahead into October, the estimate was a drawdown on that by another 291 million. And just looking forward from a board member's perspective, we would anticipate through comments made at F&A and with questions asked by the committee members that the board will be looking at a request from management sometime in the coming months with regards to additional funding for the contingencies. With that, I don't have anything that I am going to add for the Finance and Audit Committee meeting today. Are there any questions on anything that I had stated? All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you for your participation and attention. I think some very important things were raised today. And Brian, I think that your Central Valley update was extremely helpful. And I guess you could clearly say there's never enough information, but it certainly was very helpful. And I'm confident that we're moving in the right direction. When you come from so far back, it makes it sometimes more difficult to think you've gone far enough. But and none of us would like to say that it's far enough yet, but we're getting there. And we'll certainly be looking at a different approach to future construction for this project. With that, yes.
On the board too.
Yes, hi, Margaret.
Hi, I just want to congratulate Brian and the staff on the award
Oh, thank you.
that they received. I think that is extremely important.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret, very much. If there are no other comments from any members of the board, thank you for being here. We'll see everybody on December the 15th. I believe that we can plan on that being an in-person meeting in Sacramento. With that, happy Thanksgiving to you all, and
Same to you.
great day.
Same to you.
Same to you.
Those traveling, safe travel.